Namaskar, good evening and welcome to Quarantine TV and QTV Live, an initiative by Drishan. Today we are flagging off our new show, Motivational Live. Eventually today is 14th Feb and the date is observed as the Day of Love. However, there cannot be a single day dedicated to one of the sublime faculties. We shouldn't forget the sacrifice behind love that makes the day so special. Historically, we know in the 270 AD Roman Empire, the soldiers were banned from all marriage or courtship in order to make them dedicated to military. Saint Valentine at the time defied the Roman Empire Claudius and performed secret marriages, and for this reason he was put to jail. It's told that Saint Valentine even healed the jailer's blind daughter when he was in jail. Before he was beheaded, he left a letter for the girl which read, "From your Valentine." So the history of love, martyrdom, and we in Indian parlance, we can also associate the saints and the soldiers and the different leaders which we have in our rich culture of history. So let's welcome today our today's speaker, Joydeep Maharaj, Pranam, of Moromia Spiritual Society Movement. In today's parlance, we have our topic for today: the relevance of Swami Vivekananda and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in contemporary times. Welcome and good evening, Maharaj. Uh, we leave the floor to you for your valuable lecture, and at the end of the show, we shall have a question answer session where everybody is open with any sort of questions whom they can put down in the comment section, and we will highlight those questions for Maharaj to answer them. Okay.
Thank you. And greetings and namaskar to everybody watching this show and all the viewers who will join in later, or even those who might see the recording of this particular session later on. And I also am glad and grateful to Rishayan for creating this platform for a discussion which is very huge in scope. And as he had already mentioned, it is the relevance of Swami Vivekananda and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in contemporary Indian society or the Indian context. So it's a very big topic. The discussions can go on forever, for days and days. But today, just for a beginning, we will try to touch upon a few things that is quite relevant in the moment or the times that we live in. Before getting headlong into the topic, just as a background, let me mention that Swami Vivekananda was born in 1863. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was born in 1897. A 34-year-old gap between the two personalities, and this period was a very significant period for Bharat, for Bengal, for social reform, politics, the way we looked upon ourselves. And we're really grappling at that moment in the dark, trying to define who we are. So Swami Vivekananda was a pioneer in trying to define what Bharat is from a cultural standpoint, from a spiritual or from a dharmic standpoint. And he was, as you know, he's known as the patriot monk, which was a rarity in those days, because in Bharat or in India, monks are known to be quite indifferent to national issues, to politics, to what concerns the society, to the mainstream ideas. They are supposed to be doing their sadhana and moving towards their own moksha or liberation or enlightenment. So Vivekananda was such a fervent speaker for this Bharat context that he was a shock for some people in India. That being a monk, how could he be so much of a nationalist in that sense? So he was the first one who tried to build up an awareness of Bharat to meet the challenges that the Western world was thrusting upon us. He believed that obviously India needed freedom from foreign rule, but first Indians have to feel free, that they have to become conscious of who they are, and only then the political and the social freedom will be a natural consequence of that experience. That is why, in spite of a lot of provocations, he did not want to participate in the freedom struggle directly, at least not in view, in the view of broad daylight of the political or the controlling powers during his time, though, as we know, he kept very close connections with freedom fighters, revolutionaries, but all that in secret. Outwardly, his mission was spiritual, spreading the message of Vedanta and raising the consciousness at a global level, and reminding all and sundry that ours is a very old civilization, and it is the mother of all religions. So that consciousness was, he was preaching this in the West for 4 years. It was at that time that he came into the limelight. And it was also creating ripples within the Indian intellectual class, the people who were getting education under the Western system. So it was the beginning of a churning that was happening. And Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose seems to be a consequence of that great effort that Swamiji had put in. He was a kind of a practical demonstration of what Swamiji wanted to achieve. For him, from 1897 onwards to the early 20th century, freedom became very important. It became a passion for him. And he also realized that, yes, one leads to the other. Awareness will lead to freedom, but also the other way around is also true, something that Sister Nivedita insisted on, that only when India becomes free from foreign invasion, from foreign rulers, from foreign cultures, from foreign narratives, will there be a chance to dig into ourselves and find out and discover who we really are, when we are not being preached constantly about certain things. So that is the little bit of a background that I wanted to lay down before you, and we'll come more to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Swami Vivekananda's personalities and how Subhash Chandra Bose was influenced by Vivekananda. We will come to that a little later. Right now, my first point is about secularism, because it is a very hot and debatable topic now in our country. Secularism. and what it really means for us. I have tagged it with the pivotal role of dharma in Bharat. Once again, I am intentionally not using the words religion or spirituality because they mean different things and they are not translations of dharma. Dharma is completely different. Again, we'll come to that. First, let us dive headlong into secularism. The word secularism gained currency after the French Revolution, when it was decided that the church and the state have to be separated. Because for centuries, there has been an unholy nexus between the church and the state by which they have dominated the politics, the economy, the social norms, and everything. It's like the priestly class and the ruling class, they have gone hand in hand to exploit and to take advantage of the masses and the property and everything, which came to the forefront of resistance, of revolution, and it was separated. Now, this is a Christian concept, this separation of state and church. But even if we take it figuratively, what it means is that the ruling class and religious organizations should be separate. That is secularism. But when we talk about dharma, and when we use this word dharma nirapekshata, let's say in Bengali or in Sanskrit, that means be impartial from dharma. Now, what is dharma? Not religion. Religion is basically what it has come down to now is submitting oneself to certain dogmas and doctrines by which communities, they manage themselves. And that is why we have communal tensions based on communities. Dharma, the word dharma, means something or everything that holds us together and that keeps us dynamic. Dharma is not only applicable to human beings, it is also applicable to animals, plants, birds, to rivers, to land, to air, to sun, to the stars and the planets and everything. Everything has a dharma, an inherent character. The sun is moving with all the 9 planets around it. It is a dharma of the solar system. It is not a solar community. It is a solar system which runs on a dharma, on certain principles. In the same way, everything has a dharma. In the case of human beings, just because human beings have a choice, that is why this question of dharma can be explored. So what holds us together? What holds me as an individual? My life forces, my humanity. And what keeps me dynamic? My journey from animality to humanity, from humanity to divinity. So that is the concept of dharma. Should we be impartial to that? When we say dharma nirapekshata, should we remain, as a state or as a governing body, as a leadership, should we remain indifferent to that in the name of secularism? For example, politics has a dharma, or the ruler or the king during the days of the monarchy. He has a dharma. Diplomacy has a dharma. Foreign policy has a dharma. Welfare, social welfare, all these activities, they have their own dharma. In the family, there's a husband and the wife. They have a dharma in their relationship. The dharma of a husband, the dharma of a wife, the dharma of a father, the dharma of a mother, the dharma of a child, the dharma of a teacher, the dharma of a student. And all these so-called diverse dharmas are connected to the main theme of dharma, that which helps us to move forward towards realizing our own potential of divinity that is inherent in us. That is why we are here. So that was the main conflict, and that is something that is now very, very relevant to understand. That in any area of life, in the name of secularism, we are discarding all the values or all the sacred texts, all the sacred teachings and the preachings and the historical contributions of great personalities, sages like Sri Krishna or a Buddha or even a Jesus or Vivekananda, or all these people are being kept out from the main discourse, be it politics, be it education, be it society, everywhere, in the name of secularism. So that is something that has to be, confronted today, and that is happening. So what we have today in contemporary India is a polarity between secularism and nationalism. Now, in this context, I would like to quote Swami Vivekananda, because as we have, the topic is directly related to Vivekananda to begin with. Just one or few of his sayings about religion, and in the context of Bharat, in the context of our country, he says, each nation has a main current in life. In India, it is religion. Make it strong, and the waters on either side must move along with it. So if we want to take our country forward, what he says to make strong is religion. He uses the word religion because at that time, the world was totally unaware of Sanskrit and the great potential of the language. Nowadays, people know the power of Sanskrit. Even the West, they know. As you are all aware, many Sanskrit words have become part of the vocabulary of foreign languages, like karma, like guru, like avatar, like yoga, like kundalini. There should be many other words which are non-translatable. We should stop translating these words. For example, dharma. We should stop translating them into something like religion or spirituality, because they mean other things, as I have just explained. But anyway, during his time, since the world was completely unaware of the Bharatiya culture and the Bharatiya heritage and the Bharatiya languages, so he had to use the English word religion. But I think we all understand what he's trying to say when he says that in India, the main current is religion. He says here in India, it is religion that forms the very core of the national heart. It is the backbone, the bedrock, the foundation upon which the national edifice has been built. The national edifice has been built. Like, for example, if you think of France, for them it is liberty. If you think of the US, America, for them it has always been the great dream that everybody can realize his dream. When you think about our India, our country. Everything is based. If we look back to our heritage, to the way we try to understand politics and economy and science and technology and arts and education and everything, the central theme of all this was dharma. That to know myself, to realize myself, to realize the potential of humanity, we explore the world as we explore ourselves. So this is what Swami Vivekananda is trying to point out. They have to give up nothing. That means he's talking about the masses, the people in India. They have to give up nothing, but only to move on in the line laid down by the sages and shake off their inertia, the idleness, the result of centuries of servitude. Why this inertia? Because for hundreds and hundreds of years, we have been under foreign domination. That has created a kind of self-delusion, a kind of inertia, a kind of idleness, a tamasic energy. We have to just shake it off by being aware of what the sages have taught us. And then he says something very important and very pertinent, something that will question the mainstream idea. I discard the idea that India was ever passive. Now, this is something that we have been hearing all throughout. That it is the Europeans and the other cultures, they are very curious about the rest of the world. While all these civilizations, like the civilizations in Americas, the Aztec and the Maya and the Bharatiya and the Chinese and all these civilizations were isolated. They kept within themselves, not at all curious. They do not want to understand what's happening in the rest of the world. They're happy without ambitions, without an urge to expand, to grow, to beyond the shores. Now, Swami Vivekananda says, I discard the idea that India was ever passive, which clearly he's trying to say that India has done that. India has spread itself out. The Bharatiya culture has moved beyond its shores, by water, by road, through culture, through the trade, through business, but not through weapons. These outreaches have not been done through the forces of imperialism, not to conquer cultures, but to interact with them, to teach them and to learn from them, to grow together. So Bharat has not been passive at all. Even if you look at our epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, you will see how the kings and how cultures, how trade and business, they are moving out beyond our shores to reach out to semi-civilized, civilized portions of the world. So as you understand, he is questioning the Aryan theory, and we'll come to that in detail later in the second point, which is about education. Then he says, I have come to this conclusion that there is only one country in the world which understands religion, India. Now, if we analyze this is a huge topic, and we'll have to have another session for this. But let me put it very briefly, little in a nutshell, that Bharat has been a potboiler of all philosophical ideas of the world. And it has been the birthplace of many of the religions, almost all the religions, major religions, that have had an impact in anywhere, any part of the world. And I think as you are aware, or all discerning viewers aware, that in his very first speech in the Chicago Parliament Religions, he had given hints to this fact. So, because it's a thousands and thousands of years of philosophical journey, different philosophies, different ideas, different doctrines, lots of debates, lots of discourses. And so naturally, Bharat understands what is religion, what is dharma, what is adhatmikata, which is loosely translated as spirituality. What is this journey, the seeking for truth? What are the resources, the energies in the body? And what are the mind sciences, the deep psychological aspects, the chitta, the mind stuff, the deep layers of the mind, and how they're connected to our consciousness, and what are the methods through tantra, through yoga, through discrimination. There are thousands and thousands of ways that Bharat has explored. This is a laboratory of experiments with our human consciousness. And it is from here all these ideas have flown or grown outward. That is why he says that there's only one country in the world which understands religion. And this is also in context of the fact that the evangelists were trying to preach religion in India at that time, which Christianity was about 1500 years old. Because after Jesus, after 500 years after Jesus, it was in Europe that they took up Christianity as a kind of a cause. And from that, everything started. So it was about 1500 years old, and Islam was 1400 years old. These two religions which were fighting with each other for global domination and to try and control the global narrative. So naturally, he had to say this because he represented a culture which was thousands and thousands of years old. So in philosophy, he says, we are even now head and shoulders above any other nation, as Schopenhauer, the great German philosopher, has confessed. And then he says, India can never be Europe until she dies. This is also very important in today's context. We try to understand Bharat with European lens. When we talk about our development, when we talk about our politics, our economy, our social situations, our science, our technology, our education, we're always comparing ourselves with other countries, with first world countries. That is a completely different kind of a development model. And the problem is that our mind, our brains, our psyche is still very deeply colonized. Maybe politically we are not colonized as much as we were, but intellectually, morally, culturally, spiritually, the way we think of ourselves, the way we evaluate ourselves, we are very deeply colonized. So we are constantly trying to catch up with these countries who we look up to because of their economic success stories, because of the glitz and the glamour that prevail. And in the effort to try and catch up, we are trying to be like them still. But that is not really the Bharat. That is not the main theme of Bharat. How happy I am, how satisfied I am, how content I am, depends on this moment of how I am in balance with myself and with my immediate surroundings. It may not have much to do with how much money I have, or with how much bank balance I have, with how much property I have, with my GDP, with the economic calculation of GDP. So all this European model of looking at welfare, looking at social development or prosperity is not really applicable if we think about our context. And that is what Vivekananda reminds us, which is very important today, that India can never be Europe until she dies. India can only be India, or let's say, India can only be Bharat. Then again, India's theme is religion. Social reform and everything else are secondary. If we really want to take this country, this culture, this society forward, if we really want to reinvent ourselves, if we want to reclaim our own heritage, our own glory, our own potential, our own Shakti or energy, then dharma, then this search for the truth of life, which in this case, let's say, is religion. For the time being, it is the main theme. Without it, if we try to eliminate religion, as we have been trying to do in the name of secularism, that's why all these quotations are coming up. And all this he had said much before. He was obviously aware of the fact that there is a danger of secularism, the ideas of secularism dominating the discourse, even after independence. And that is exactly what has happened. So main theme is religion, and does not have to be a Hindu religion or Islam religion or a Christian religion. It is dharma, the sense of dharma. You see, that is the central. And he says social reform and everything else are secondary. When he built up Ramakrishna Mission, he gave a lot of emphasis on social reform as a secondary activity. The primary activity being Atma Moksharte Jagat Hitayo, that you try to do good to the world for your own enlightenment. It was a spiritual exercise. It was a dharmic exercise. It was not social welfare to sort of raise the quality of social life. It was social welfare as a seva, as a devotional sadhana. So that is why he says, because at that time, during Vivekananda's time and after, the social welfare ideas of, let's say, Raja Ram Mohan Rai and Vidyasagar did not very much influence Vivekananda. He was not that he was dismissive about it, but all this was not very important to him. Because again, in all these reforms, in so-called reforms, it was a Western European idea that was working. It's a Western idea of reform which did not take into consideration the historical background of these ills that had steeped in the Indian society. And he was very keenly aware of that. So that is why he says that main theme is religion, social reforms, everything else secondary. And then this is something that is very close to what Netaji's idealism has been built up on. National union in India must be a gathering of its scattered spiritual forces. Because as we all know, that the Bharatiya Dharma is not organized. It does not need to be. Not in the sense, the way the Christian Dharma, the Christian religion, they organize themselves, whether it is Roman Catholic or whether it is Protestant, whether it is Anglican or whatever, the Lutheran. They organize themselves. They have a kind of a structured hierarchies where there is a kind of a supreme authority, both for Christian and for the Islamic worldview. In Bharat, you wouldn't find that kind of a Hindu authority or a Hindu organization that sort of governs over sort of it as if it is an umbrella of the dharma movements that are happening in Bharat. It's very scattered, it's very random, it's almost chaotic, and that's why it's very adventurous, and it's in a way very beautiful, and in a way it's very exciting also. All these different paths and ideas and doctrines are constantly clashing and conflicting and surviving and growing and dropping off. All these things are constantly happening in Bharat all the time. And it is not organized in that sense, but for a national union, to develop a kind of a national spirit, let's say, he emphasizes on this point that all the scattered spiritual forces have to be gathered. I mean, the idea of Bharat must become a religion by itself also. As you all know, Vivekananda used to say, for the moment, for the time being, throw out all these gods and goddesses into the river and let Bharat Mata be your Ishtar. Let Bharat Mata be your divine purpose. Not only freedom, but awakening. A nation in India must be a union of those whose heart beat to the same spiritual tune. Not same communal tune, not same religious tune, but he specifically says spiritual tune. So again, it is a very important distinction that Swamiji makes, that whatever may be the methods or the pursuits or the seeking exercises, whatever, you may be a Vaishnava, you may be a yogi, you may be a Shakta, you may be a Advaita Vedantist, you may be a Dvaitavadi, you may be a devotee, you may be even a non-believer, you may be a doubter, or even you may be following the Islamic path or the Christian path, or you may be a Buddhist, or maybe a Sheikh, or whatever you are. But let us assume that because you are on the path of dharma, that you are moving towards your full potential. In that sense, whoever you are, your heart is beating in the same tune as the rest of the country, and that unites us. That is our identity. That is our national identity. So I think this is very important to identify or understand that this concept of secularism has to be challenged, very seriously challenged. And it has to be countered not by religion. I mean, doesn't have to be countered by a particular religion, but by an idea of nationalism, which at its base, at its core, is not really a political kind of a nationalism. It's a cultural kind of an identity, a spiritual identity, a cultural identity, which needs to be protected, of course, because the world is not a very peaceful world. The world is generally very aggressive. And so that cultural identity needs to be protected. So now, in this context of secularism and nationalism, let's see what Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose has to say. The moment India is free, the most important problem will be the organizing of our national defense in order to safeguard our freedom in the future. because obviously all these hundreds of years of foreign rule had really hampered our movements, have taken us back. We were not really ready together because there was a lack of political, you say, cohesion. There was a lack of feeling the national sentiment within all these political divisions and the decentralized processes. So he's quite emphatic about this, and he had been so throughout his life, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. For what we shall have to build up, for that we shall have to build up modern war industries, so that we may produce the arms that we shall need for self-defense. This will mean a very big program of industrialization. As we are all aware, that Swami Vivekananda was very much impressed by this industrial revolution that was going on in Europe and America, and he wanted a free India, or a self-reliant India, to become Rajasic, to shake off their tamasic inertia, and to build up industries. And Netaji goes further and says that we immediately after independence should build up our defense system, our own defense system, and we should heavily industrialize ourselves for that. Contrast that to what happened. Our first Prime Minister became a leader of the non-aligned movement, that we will be aligned to no one, and we will not concentrate on defense at all. We will not buy weapons, we will not create weapons. Some of these gun and shell factories were closed down after independence. Gandhiji, immediately after independence, insisted that we should have an army without weapons, and that army should be called Shanti Sena, something that one of his disciples, Vinoba Bhave, insisted very, very strongly. He used to write letters and apply to the President of India, repeatedly urging that India should slowly move towards deweaponizing itself. Till we learned a big lesson in, as you know, in 1962, when we were just ripped apart, you could say, decimated, totally beaten black and blue by the Chinese forces. And then India started, thinking about its own defense program. But then we were very ill-equipped, so we became totally dependent on other countries, especially Soviet Russia, for all this support that we needed to defend ourselves. We did not build up our own defense systems. Even now that we are trying to catch up with our neighbors, especially China, we realize that we are almost 20, 25 years behind them. Because China started late, but then it got far ahead of us. We are late, and we are much, much behind them. And we are still dependent on many of our technologies and our defense systems and everything on other countries. Though we are trying to become self-sufficient if we compare ourselves to those times. And then he says, Netaji, let's sort of shift to his personal, reminiscences about Swamiji. I was barely 15 when Vivekananda entered my life. Then there followed a revolution within, and everything was turned upside down. He was searching, he was grappling for something to try and understand. There was some sort of an inner urge within him. And he was running around here and there, and especially he was looking for sadhus and monks to go within himself, to do sadhana, to tap the potentials or the energies that are lying within him, the voice that was speaking to him. So he really wanted to energize himself, to understand. Again, everything starts from here. When we are not at all aware of what's happening within us, and we try to go out and do something for the country, something for the society, that is completely wayward, that does not take us anywhere. All these ideas of NGOs and social welfare and doing something for the nation without digging in first within ourselves takes us nowhere. We have to start within. And that is the Bharatiya message. That if you want to do something for the world, be and make. Be, become, make. And that make, you don't have to do it. It happens. Like a flower. It becomes a flower. And the flower then does not have to decide that now I will show off my colors. Now I will spread off my fragrance. Now I will become useful in the temple at the feet of a deity. Now I will be the decoration on a beautiful lady's head. The flower does not have to think these things. It just flowers. And then whatever happens, happens. It is being made used of. Even if it falls on the ground, it comes to some use as the cycle continues in nature. So that is how Netaji also approached. He was not directly going for a kind of a political activism. First, he knew that he had to find some answers within himself, and he was desperately grappling. And then one of his friends gave him this book about Vivekananda, and he devoured it. And the more he went into Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, the Gospels and Mahasarada, it was a revolution within himself. Vivekananda was of great help to me, he's saying, Netaji. The religion he preached, including his concept of yoga, was based on a rational philosophy, on the Vedanta, and his concept of Vedanta was not antagonistic to, but was based on scientific principles. Because he was getting a modern education, Subhash Bose, so he had an inquiring mind, a scientific mind, a rationalistic mind, was something that wanted to also understand certain things intellectually. He had to be convinced. And in Vivekananda, he found not only the answers, but also the inspiration. In practical life, I was going to emulate Ramakrishna and Vivekananda as far as possible. The intellectual doubt which assailed me needed satisfaction, and constituted as I was then, that satisfaction would not have been possible without some rational philosophy. The philosophy which I found in Vivekananda and Ramakrishna came nearest to meeting my requirements and offered a basis on which to reconstruct my moral and practical life. So from here on, whatever he was doing, even as a politician, all the choices he made and all the decisions he took, some of the decisions are very, very controversial till this day. He got that inspiration, he got that food from what he learned, or what he understood of Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. It equipped me with certain principles with which to determine my conduct or line of action wherever any problem or crisis arose before my eyes. In 1913, that means, look, he was only 16 years old. In 1913, he wrote to his brother, Sharad Bose, what was India and what is she now? What a terrible change. And which India is he talking about? Don't we all know that India is in a deep darkness in the medieval age when the Europeans came, and was almost the jungle Raj when the Mughals had come? Though all these discoveries in Harappa and Mohenjo-daro and all these places completely destroyed these ideas, but at that time, in 1913, when he's saying what was India and what is she now, so Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is completely aware of the the history, the true history of Bharat. What a terrible change. But there is hope yet. I think there is hope yet. This is very pertinent to today. The angel of hope has appeared in our midst to put fire in our soul and to shake off our dull sloth. It is the saintly Vivekananda. There stands he with his angelic appearance, his large and piercing eyes, and his sacred dress to preach to the whole world the sacred truths lying embedded in Hinduism. Let's say in Vedanta. And though I personally don't really understand what Hinduism actually means, but anyway, let's say Vedanta, what we generally understand by the Indian thoughts of the Indian philosophies. It was Swami Vivekananda, he wrote in 1929, many years later, who had, on the one hand, boldly asked his fellow men to shred off all sorts of fetters and be men in the truest sense of the term, and on the other hand, laid the foundation of true nationalism in India by preaching the essential unity of all religions and sects. As you know, Ramakrishna himself became an embodiment of this synthesis of all religious ideas and doctrines and sadhanas and paths, that everything leads to that same goal and the same purpose. So again, this emphasis on nationalism, that this concept of dharma is equated with the concept of nationalism. And that is why in today's world, in Bharat, this fierce debate between secularism and nationalism is actually a conflict of two narratives. This nationalism concept was always there, but it was not becoming mainstream. Secularism was the dominating discourse soon after independence, and it became embedded in the constitution. Secularism, as you know, was not there in the beginning in the constitution. Why was it not there? Because Dr. B.R. Ambedkar did not want that word to be there. He felt that there is no need at all for that word, or the other word, socialist, for those words to be there in the constitution. But during the emergency, when all the opposition leaders and all the detractors of the government were put to jail by Mrs. Gandhi, and there was almost nobody in the parliament, no opposition in the parliament, there she made the amendment to the constitution, and she inserted these two words, secularism and socialism, socialist and secular, these two words. And then she established, it made it official that this word and this is going to dominate totally. So there will be no place for dharma anywhere in politics, in religion, in any place. In a country, if we look back to our history, we see Chanakya, we see Ramdas, the guru of Shivaji, an ascetic who is giving all the plans, who is laying out the strategy for Shivaji. Now, how is an ascetic able to do that? Because he is not tied to anything. Neither is he tied to a community, nor is he tied to a throne, nor is he tied to a kind of a worldly pursuits. Neither does he have a family to look after. So he is under no threat. So he has a much broader and a clearer vision of things. And of course, being a seeker or being a sadhu, he has a deep understanding of human psychology. So he understands the forces that are working against Shivaji or working against the interests of the Marathi culture or the Bharatiya culture. In the same way, Chanakya, who tried to create a kind of a pan-Indian political identity through a lot of manipulation, through great strategic thinking, and he was not only a strategist, he was also an economist, a political economist, a master manipulator, but he was in a way an ascetic. He was a Brahmin who just lived in a cottage. I mean, he was not clamoring for palaces and perks and benefits or trying to buy islands somewhere. He was just concerned about what will be the fate of this big country called Bharat, Mahabharat. In the same way, if you look at Ramayana, if you look at Mahabharat, we see that there are kings, some good kings, some not so good kings, but there are always these ascetics who come and advise the kings. Mind you, they are not the church. Church in the sense, they are not religious institutions. They are just great sages who have no personal desire. It is not like that I am some great monk of India and the Prime Minister comes and takes advice from me and we share the stage together and I have millions and millions of devotees. And when I share stage with the Prime Minister, I'm giving out a signal to my devotees that they should all vote for his party. And as an exchange, my ashram grows and I get a lot of benefits. I build up centers in different places. The government gives me land at very cheap prices, and all this is an excess, plain and simple. But when Vashishta is coming to Dasharath to educate Rama and Lakshmana and Bharata and Shatrugna on philosophy or on warfare, on these things, or when Vishwamitra comes, they have no personal or self-interest. Yes, if their ashram is attacked, which had been attacked by terrorists in the jungle, then they will come to the Kshatriya for help as far as security is concerned. Because they are sages, they are leading a Brahmanical life, so they will not lift up weapons by themselves. That is different. But they will not come and tell Dasharath, look, I am going to educate your son and for that give me 50,000 rupees per month as a kind of a fees, as a professional fees. Or destroy other sages or monks or gurus who are trying to work along the same lines, destroy them, cancel their licenses. I want to be the only one around. They are not going to say that. They are tyagis. They have renounced these selfish interests. So, the guardianship of the society belonged to the tyagis, the one who explained the ideas of dharma, the subtle ideas of dharma when it came to politics, when it came to social welfare, when it came to war, when it came to decision making, when it came to building up alliances with other kingdoms, other kings, because they have a foresight, they have a vision. These sages are not obligated that they have to be popular. These sages or these monks are not there to win votes for the king. There are not going to be any votes. If the king makes mistakes, he will scold them. He will admonish him, as we see Vyasdev repeatedly scolding his son Dhritarashtra, the king, because of his obsession, because of his prejudices, because of his blind affection and love for his son, evil son. He is not scared that I am scolding the king in front of everybody, maybe he will put me to jail. No, they are taking it with their heads down. So as soon as we put in this secular stamp, the secular barrier, we are destroying this, this equation. This is not a nexus between the priestly class and the state. This is not a nexus at all. These sages and these monks are in regular day-to-day contact with the simple people of the world, with villagers, with city dwellers, with farmers, with fishermen, with craftsmen, with poor and the middle class and the rich, and they understand the country. and they do not have a community to defend. So you see, that was the role of dharma. That is why Yudhishthir becomes the king eventually after the war, because he is a son of dharma, not because he is politically ambitious. In fact, Yudhishthir was not ambitious. After the 13 years in the wilderness, Yudhishthir and the Pandavas did not want the kingdom of Hastinapur. They just told Krishna, look, just give us 5 villages and we are happy. We do not want to fight this war. Because all the experience, all these 13 years of experience has softened them, mellowed them. They were not anymore seeking revenge. They were not bitter anymore about anything. There was no personal bitterness or ambition working anymore. But the war was important to Krishna because whether Yudhishthir is personally ambitious or not is not important, because dharma has to be established. And Yudhishthir is a symbol of dharma because he is constantly questioning, analyzing the values of his times. That is what you can say a king or a ruler or whoever should do. He used to take advice from all the gurus and the Brahmins and the Pandits, but he used to constantly analyze. He never allowed others to dictate his conscience. He always questioned and evaluated and dealt with each situation according to its own merit, not according to some law books, not according to what is written down in the 356A of the Constitution. According to his own understanding, according to his own values. And he is constantly challenging the values of his times that were prevalent before and during him. That's why he is a revolution. Unlike Bhishma, unlike Vidur, unlike others who were very dharmic people, very good people, nice people. But Yudhishthir was different. He was questioning, seeking. Even in the last moment of his life, he questioned the general idea that I will go to heaven. The dog does not have to, because it's a dog after all. But he said, no, he has been a companion. He has been with me when I'm alone. So if he doesn't go with me, I'm not interested in heaven. I will stay with him. He's constantly questioning the general ideas about heaven and hell and good and bad and right and wrong. And that is what a dharmic person should do. It's a constant journey. It's just not following a set of rules. Anyway, now we will jump to the next part of this idea of secularism, which is, of course, the fact that we all know that Swami Vivekananda had said that you cannot have dharma in empty stomach. And this is something, khali pete dharma hoy na. In Bengali, it has become like a mantra. Everybody says that. Whenever we try to talk about dharma, whenever we try to talk about spirituality or yoga, we are constantly being told by these very liberal people that India is a very poor country and we are starving and nobody gets his 2 square meals per day. So what is this nonsense about dharma and spirituality? As Vivekananda said, don't you remember that there cannot be dharma in empty stomach? Look, I want to sort of get onto it a bit here. It is very important. Look what Swamiji is saying, telling Westerners. You erect churches all through India, but the crying evil in the East is not religion. They have religion enough, but it is bread that the suffering millions of burning India cry out for with parched throats. They ask us for bread, but we give them. Who are these we? These are the missionaries. He's talking about Christian evangelists. He's not talking about Hindu monks. They ask us for bread, but we give them stones. It is an insult to a starving people to offer them religion. It is an insult to a starving man to teach him metaphysics. In India, important, in India, a priest that preached for money would lose caste and be spat upon by the people. A priest who preached for money. There is no concept, or there was no concept of a professional priest. Okay, I'll go and do puja at your home. My rate is 600 rupees. That was unthinkable at that time. So he's challenging, or he's questioning the motives or the intentions of the missionaries. So when he said that you cannot have dharma in empty stomach, he was addressing all the people who are trying to preach these new religions in India. They're spending millions of rupees or pounds or whatever to erect church after church, and spending a lot of money to sort of induce the masses, to sort of show them a kind of a paradise that Jesus promised to the people. And all these things he was doing. Remember also that he himself was a monk, and he himself was wearing these Gerua robes, and he was doing the work of Dharma, and he was preaching all the time, most of the time. So he was not addressing Indians. In fact, he wanted a kind of a sense of Dharma to permeate in Indian life, to understand, to rediscover ourselves. That was very important. He was always coaxing, urging his Guru Bhais to go out into the villages and to start preaching, to spread knowledge. And then he built up this institution, this organization, Ramakrishna Mission. It was an intentional usage of the word mission to counter the intentions or the motives of the missionaries who were doing all this work to make this country a Christian country, to force upon us a kind of a Christian ideology. So to counter that missionary, narrative or the discourse or whatever, the idea that the Hindu Dharma does not do any direct social work. And of course, Hindu Dharma was never aggressive in that sense, in the sense that it has to convert and it to spread out. And no, the idea was wherever you are, whatever you are doing, you can raise yourself from that. And if you need help, okay, there are places where there is help. There are gurus and masters and teachers and acharyas to help. That's a different story altogether. But the fact is that the Ramakrishna Mission concept concentrated on social work like education, health, and relief, especially when there are, natural disasters or very adverse circumstances. All this done without the motive of conversion. There was no question of converting. Whoever you are, whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Shudra or a Brahmin or a man or a woman or a child or poor or rich or middle, whatever you are, if there is need, there is service available, and it is done with love and with devotion for self-realization, as I said. So he was trying to demonstrate a completely different perspective of Indian Dharma as opposed to the missionary activities of these Europeans and their Indian, counterparts or foils. And he was introducing a new concept also, which he called karma yoga. It was not really an official yoga before. Nobody could talk about karma yoga. People talked about bhakti yoga, talked about dhyan yoga, but he started proclaiming or advocating this new concept of karma yoga. There was always karma. For example, for Arjuna, fighting the war was a karma yoga. But that expression was not really used. It was actually a part of bhakti yoga. Karma yoga was basically a part of bhakti yoga, and people understood this karma within bhakti yoga. People understood it to be serving the devotee, cleaning the temple, and looking after all these festivals and these pujas, and decorating the deity, and all these things which had to be done very meticulously, maintaining the time and maintaining all the formalities. All these were considered to be karma in bhakti yoga. But the karma yoga that Swami Vivekananda introduced, and later many other organizations also in India grew up or developed itself along those lines of karma yoga, of service, social service, national service, was a counter to the missionary activities that the Europeans were trying to promote. And this is something very interesting, and something that we should always remember. And in this context, let me come to another very interesting letter that we have found, which is there. We all know Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was a fiercely secular person, that he opposed these Hindu groups and these Islamic groups, fierce opponent of these disparate groups who were trying to have for themselves different nations. And he had a lot of difference of opinions, very heated difference of opinions with Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, with Veer Savarkar, and also some of these Muslim leaders. And his whole life was built upon a kind of a national identity where it will not be a country of Hinduism, neither will it be a country of Islam. It will be a nationalistic Bharat, where all these castes and creeds and religions and doctrines can freely express themselves, but with a nationalistic undertone, which he always talked about, and which he said he had learned and inculcated and got inspiration from Swami Vivekananda. But this same Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, in 1926, he writes a letter from the jail, possibly from the cellular jail. I may be wrong about this, which jail he was in. In the continent, the letter is in Bengali, but we have translated it for today's session into English. In the continent of Africa, nowadays, only two religions are preached: Christianity and Islam. Why will Hindu religion not be preached over there? Sister Nivedita is of the opinion that Hindu religion would have to be aggressive. Swami Vivekananda too had preached our ideology for this purpose. He had gone to America and Europe to preach religion. If our religion is preached in either Europe or America, their ideas about the Hindus might change. The Western philosophy may be influenced by the Hindu philosophy. The pride and the dignity of Indians will be enhanced, but they will not become Hindus. On the other hand, if our religion is preached among the Africans, they might adopt Hinduism. And if they accept Hinduism, they will convert in thousands. We may raise a question: what is the gain? First of all, we all gain by preaching the truth. Secondly, by adopting Hindu religion And by gaining the light of civilization, the uncivilized or the half-civilized Africans will become civilized. Thirdly, by becoming aggressive, the Hindu religion will become stronger, and they will be forced to shred off some of their own dogmas and superstitions as a consequence of preaching in other countries. India's position in the world will become higher. If among the Africans 20 million people become Hindus, surely the influence of Hindu race and India will be quite significant in Africa. If India has to become a world power, the preaching of Hindu religion will be very beneficial. Leaving aside the Islamic countries, only India has spread civilization and religion all over Asia. Why should not they do that in Africa? Due to racial conflicts, Africans will not want to convert to Christianity in future. By becoming Christians, people usually become enemies of their own race and adopt the culture of other races. For this reason, in the absence of other religions, Africans will be forced to convert to Islam. Adopting Islam will help them to develop. They will not be overwhelmed by other cultures, and yet they'll become stronger and more organized. By converting to the Hindu religion, how much progress can happen to other cultures? Is this not an interesting subject to experiment with? This letter, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose wrote on the 5th of May, 1926. So this is again a very significant, letter. He was completely aware of what he was talking about. So when he's bent in his political life, he's bent on resisting these communal forces, he's also very much aware of what he was trying to do. He was trying to keep Bharat undivided, because he knew that if India breaks on religious lines, it will break further. There will be more and more pieces that will split away from India, from this concept of Bharat. So he disappeared in 1945, and then Bharat was partitioned. And if we are going to talk about the contemporary realities of today, we have to acknowledge what has now become quite obvious, that Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose did not die in 1945, he lived on. Not only did he live on, he was in India for almost 30 years, off and on, more or less. And he was not just there as a reclusive monk, just surviving and hiding away from media, or away from people, away from politics. He was doing a lot of work. And I think one day it will come to the surface. This is something that may be sensitive and very debatable. Whatever is happening today in our country, in Asia, elsewhere, almost in all the places over the world, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, or the monk who lived in Bharat, in the remote places in Uttar Pradesh, different locations, he had started, or he had set off a process there. And today we do not have really the time to go into all these details, but the fact that, as I have said, that there is a emerging debate about nationalism and secularism, and we are harping on this topic for a long time because it is a very, very contemporary issue, a burning issue, something we all are concerned with, and about something which we should take a stand on. And we should become aware of what we are doing. We do not have to agree with all these ideas, or we do not have to blindly disagree, but we have to allow this churning to happen without just straight jacketing that I am secular or I am religious, or this I'm Hindu and Jai Sri Ram and I do not want this Sri Ram concept, all this one line kind of decisions, all these one line kind of conclusions have to be done away with. We have to look at the nuances. We have to look at the threats. And one of the threats is that this concept of secularism has the potential to break India, Bharat, again into multiple pieces. And that is why the concept of nationalism is important. The only question that some skeptics might ask in this context, in this reference is, then why does it have to be Hindu nationalism? Why not just nationalism? Well, as I've been explaining to you all this while, that our psyche, our culture have developed in such a way that subconsciously we have inculcated a dharmic sentiment, a religious sentiment. At least it is now a sensitive enough word for us to bring at least a major part of Bharatiyas and Indians together, and to expand the scope of the term Hindutya or Bharatiya or whatever, or Sanatan, so as to encompass or embrace all other doctrines as long as they acknowledge a cultural unity or identity that is Bharat. And it is very important at the moment to keep Bharat together. Or, as Netaji had planned, or had Mahakal had envisaged or dreamed very passionately, or even Rishi Aurobindo, even my own Guruji, of an Akhanda Bharat, of our undivided Bharat. Whether it is political or whether it is the concept is of a nation state as of today, that is for the future to see. But the undivided cultural unity that we have with each other, with everybody, and this is actually a nation. In a cultural sense, in a dharmic sense, in a historical sense, in a civilizational sense, this is a nation. So these narratives and these politics are always threatening to break that fabric. And why are these forces working? Both around the country, that is with the neighbors, within the country, and also in foreign lands, in university seminars, in Europe, in books, in the intellectual spaces, in the media, among the pundits, among the scholars. Why are we constantly being made to feel inferior? Therein lies a tale. Because the world in general, the first world, the Europeans or the whites, let's say, are scared. Scared of what? That they had built up a narrative not only for India, not only for Bharat. This is something that is very important to understand. That narrative has also been their own. It is that which has defined them. And this is going to be my second very important point, which is education. Today, modern education. What was the Bharatiya model of Shiksha? Education. Let's say, again, let's go to Swami Vivekananda, who says that It is the manifestation of the perfection already in man. It is a full realization and manifestation of the perfection already in man. So he's talking about a spiritual vertical movement upwards. So where is that education? Where is that education? And that's why we are now threatened. All this virus and the vaccine has completely put a full stop to this education, because to my mind it has become a joke. This kind of very secular, very materialistic kind of so-called education, which is actually meant to feed a big economic machinery for livelihood, for occupation, for career, which has nothing to do with humanity, with an evolution of the heart, with a keener insight into life, with a more compassion towards our surroundings, to nature, to plants, to the soil, to the society, to the culture, to our relationships. Absolutely all that has been totally wiped out from our education. It's a very bone dry, boring, depressing, pressurizing kind of education, which is a kind of a torture on young kids. Vivekananda succinctly puts it this way: we have had a negative education. This is what Swamiji is saying. We have had a negative education all along from our boyhood. We have only learned that we are nobodies. Seldom are we given to understand that great men were ever born in our country. Nothing positive has been taught to us. We do not even know how to use our hands and feet. We master all the facts and figures concerning the ancestors of the English, but we are sadly unmindful about our own. We have learnt only weakness. Being a conquered race, we have brought ourselves to believe that we are weak and have no independence in anything. So how can it be but that the Shraddha is lost? The idea of true Shraddha must be brought back once more to us. The faith in our own selves must be reawakened in our own selves. That is the national self that he's talking about. And then only all the problems which face our country will gradually be solved by ourselves. We will not have to wait for someone else to come and solve our problems according to their terms. And what he says all these years ago, in the late 19th century, is still so true today. 120 years later, when he says that we are taught how weak we are, that we are capable of nothing. At least the national sentiment is no more like that, but our education is like that. That all the knowledge, all the technology, anything that is good, all the good theories about evolution, about life and everything has come from elsewhere. And we knew nothing. Only we talked about Atma and Paramatma, and the rest of the world taught us everything else. And only we invented 1, 0 and everything else they gave us. All these are lies. These are just not stories or narratives. These are plain and simple, blunt lies. And those lies are going on in our education. And there is absolutely no morality, no, let's say, growth as a human being in our education. The shiksha that Vivekananda had defined, nothing at all. So this system is a very, very big question that has to be addressed today. And when the real history, Swamiji says, when the real history of India will be unearthed, it will be proved that in matters, as in matters of religion, so in fine arts, India is the primal guru of the whole world. And I will add to this, as in matters of religion, so in fine arts, so in science, so in technology, so in politics, so in governance, so in social reforms, so in economics, in every sphere of life, India is the primal guru of the whole world. And we can, of course, if people are doubtful about our contentions, then we can obviously have another session on this. Like right now, we continue. In literature, our epics and poems and dramas, Vivekananda is saying, rank as high as those of any language. He is being modest. It is much higher. Our Shakuntala was summarized by Germany's greatest poet as heaven and earth united. In music, India gave to the world her system of notation with the 7 cardinal notes and the diatonic scale, all of which we enjoyed as early as 350 BC, while it came to Europe only in the 11th century. Swamiji says, in philology, our Sanskrit language is now universally acknowledged to be the foundation, not the sister language, as the foundation of all European languages, which in fact are nothing, the European languages, which are nothing but jargonized Sanskrit. These are very strong words, and these are very important words. And this has to be understood in the proper perspective. It has to be acknowledged. Whether the government and their policy acknowledges it or not are not important. First, we have to do it. And then the government or the ruling dispensation of the day will naturally respond. First, we have to rise up. We have to awake, be aware of ourselves. And in this context, let us also remind our viewers that Swami Vivekananda, Rishi Aurobindo, and none other than B.R. Ambedkar completely refuted, fiercely opposed the Aryan invasion theory, because this is the root of the problem that Vivekananda is talking about. The Aryan invasion theory. This was something that was invented to justify the fact that they came here and looted us and ruled over us, destroyed our history, even managed to destroy our memories. Of course, we are also at fault for all these things, all these crimes happening on us. We had suffered because we were at that time completely in a kind of a daze, maybe in a stupor. We did not realize what was happening, because in many areas there was some, let's say, apprehensions or some opposition to the Mughal rule. So we really did not make much differentiation. People thought maybe this is going to be probably better than the previous one. And it started from Bengal, as we all know. The British, the East India Company, starting to spread out. Here is Swami Vivekananda. It's very important to re-emphasize. It's not something that only a few scholars are saying. It's not something that only some Hindu nationalists are saying. Let me be very, very clear about this, that I'm in the intellectual circles, in the scholastic circles, no less than 20 years back, the Aryan invasion theory has been completely debunked. Unfortunately, it has not become official. Unfortunately, it has not become a part of the textbooks, because as I said, there's a grand narrative tied to it. It is not only a a question that concerns India. It is a question that concerns the identity of the Europeans as well, because they want to think that it is a white man who has invented the civilization as we know it today. So that's why they have to keep on with this Aryan invasion ideas in Asia. They have to constantly try and justify that the people who landed from Europe in the shores of America were far more civilized than the Aborigines who lived in America for 20,000 years, or the Aborigines who lived in Australia or New Zealand. And so the people who lived in India, they had to do this. They have to do it, and they have to continue doing it, in spite of the fact that they know that their narrative is being challenged every day and has been completely disproved. But this is today's what I'm talking about. But look at what Swamiji is saying. And look how much we have paid heed to him for 120 years. We have not done anything about that. We thought he's a monk and he cannot be a pandit. He's not a scholar. How does he know all these things? But look what he says. What your European pandits say about the Aryans swooping down from some foreign land, snatching away the lands of the Aborigines, and settling in India by exterminating them is all pure nonsense, foolish talk. Vivekananda. Strange that our Indian scholars too say amen to them. Say amen to them. All these monstrous lies are being taught to our boys. This is very bad indeed. He had realized the threat of this. And this is the curse, or this is the cross that we are still carrying on our shoulders officially in our systems of administration, in our education, in our scholastic activities, in every field of life, in the way we think of life, in our ambitions, in our desires. Everything is ruled by this idea. As a follow-up to this idea, in reply to the address of the Maharaja of Khetri on 4th March 1895, Swami Vivekananda writes, nowadays, everybody blames those who constantly look back to their past, is, as they say, is the cause of all India's woes. It is natural. When we look back and we say that the past is responsible for all the suffering that's happening today. But he says, to me, on the contrary, it seems that the opposite is true. So long as they forgot the past, very important, so long as they forgot the past, the Hindu nation remained in a state of stupor. And as soon as they have begun to look into their past, there is on every side a fresh manifestation of life. The more, therefore, the Hindu study the past, the more glorious will be their future. When we realize that how deep our roots are, then we will be inspired to rise more to the sky. And whoever tries to bring the past to the door of everyone is a great benefactor to his nation. He further adds, wherever the Europeans find an opportunity, they will exterminate the Aborigines and settle down in ease and comfort on their lands, and therefore think that the Aryans have done the same. But where is the proof? Guesswork, Swamiji is saying. Then he says, in what Veda, what Shukta do you find that the Aryans came to India from a foreign country? Where do you get the idea that they slaughtered wild Aborigines? What do you gain by talking such nonsense? Well, what is the Ramayana? The conquest of the savage Aborigines of southern India by Aryans? He's questioning it, which is still going on. This is a kind of narrative that still the liberals and the intellectuals are carrying on. Indeed, Ramachandra is a civilized Arjo being, and with whom is he fighting? with the king Ravana of Lanka. He's not an aborigine. Just read the Ramayana and you will find that Ravan was rather more, not less civilized than Ramchandra. The civilization of Lanka was rather higher and surely not lower than that of Ayodhya. And then, when were these Vanaras, that is the tribes of the forest, the monkeys, which we say, and other southern Indians conquered? They were all, on the other hand, Ramchandra's friends and allies. Say, what kingdoms of Bali and Guhak were annexed by Ramachandra? Did you go around capturing these places and making them as some kind of territories, extended territories of Ayodhya kingdom? That is the question. He made friendships with them. And may I ask you, Europeans, what country you have ever raised to better conditions? Wherever you have found weaker races, you have examined them by the roots, as it were. And weaker in the sense of, let's say, fighting wars with guns and swords and all these things. That is the only weakness, probably the Aztecs, the Mayans, in some parts of India, probably the only weakness. That we were not expansionist, or these people, these civilizations were not expansionist in the military sense, in the imperial sense, that we have to go around and conquer and capture and make them our property. There was a concept of expansion in a cultural sense, in a trading sense, in a relation, at a level of relationships. Anyway, wherever you have found weaker races, you have examined them by the roots, as it were. You have settled on their lands, and they are gone forever, these people. They have been completely wiped out. They have disappeared. They have been digested. What is the history of your America, your Australia and New Zealand, your Pacific Islands and South Africa? Where are those aboriginal races today? Swami Vivekananda is asking all these years back. Very modern, very pertinent questions. They are all exterminated. You have killed them outright as if they were wild beasts. It is only where you have not the power to do so, and there only, that other nations are still alive, wherever you have not been able to do this. But India has never done that, has never done what America and Europe has done. The Aryas were kind and generous, and in their hearts, which were large and unbounded as the ocean, and in their brains, gifted with superhuman genius, all these ephemeral and apparently pleasant but virtually beastly processes never found a place. The object of the peoples of Europe is the extermination of all in order to live themselves. The aim of the Arya is to raise all up to their own level, nay, even to a higher level than themselves. The means of the European civilization is a sword. The Aryas, the division into different varnas. The system of division into different varnas is actually, the varnashram system is actually a very scientific system. The system is universal. It is there all over the world, only in different name and different forms. The system of division in different varnas is the stepping stone to civilization, making one rise higher and higher in proportion to one's learning and culture. In Europe, it is everywhere victory to the strong and death to the weak. In the land of Bharat, every social rule is for the protection of the weak. From where did the Aryans come? According to some, they came from central Tibet. Others will have it, they came from Central Asia. There are patriotic Englishmen who think that the Aryans were all red-haired. He's, as you can understand, he's just joking now. Of late, there was an attempt to prove that the Aryans lived on the Swiss lakes. Some say now that they live in the North Pole. Lord bless the Aryans and their habitants. As for the truth of these theories, there is not one word in scriptures, not one, to prove that the Aryans ever came from anywhere outside of India. And in ancient India was included Afghanistan. There it ends. And the theory that the Shudra caste were all non-Aryans and they were a multitude is equally logical and equally irrational. He criticizes the Western savants who, finding several terms of Indian astronomy and coming to know that the Greeks founded a small kingdom on the borders of India, can clearly read the help of Greece on anything Indian, of Indian literature, Indian astronomy, Indian arithmetic. Not only so, Ney has been bold enough to go so far as to declare that all Indian sciences, as a rule, are but echoes of the Greek. And Swamiji responds, when the germ of the Arya science is found in the Vedas, and every step of any of those sciences can be traced with exactness from the Vedic to the present day, which is a necessity of forcing the far-fetched suggestion of the Greek influence of them. Again, every Greek-like word of Arya astronomy can be easily derived from Sanskrit roots. And while discussing the one of the things that the Dravid and the Aryan and the Sanskrit and Tamil, the war, the intellectual, the social, the breaking war is still going on. Swamiji, all these years back, 125 years back, he says, while discussing Aryans and Tamilians, he notes, whatever may be the import of the philological terms, Arjo and Tamilian, even taking for granted that both these grand subdivisions of Indian humanity came from outside the Western frontier, the dividing line from the most ancient times is one of the language and not of the blood. It's not different races. A gentle yet clear brushing off the cobwebs of the so-called Arjo theory and of its vicious corollaries is therefore absolutely necessary, he says, especially for the South, and a proper self-respect created by a knowledge of the past grandeur of one of the great ancestors of the Arya race, the great Tamilians. That is Vivekananda's take. And it is very important that today our education system is completely stripped of the truth. And that is why we still, as a culture, as a nation, is grappling for a right identity. And all these things need to be discussed and need to be understood. I added with education the Bharatiya model. What is the Bharatiya model? The Chaturashram model. How does it begin? The first ashram of that model is the Gurukul or the Brahmacharya ashram. In fact, when the Europeans first came to Bharat, the Gurukul, the toll, still survived in many places in spite of the Islamic influence. Even higher learning persisted in spite of the fact that the foreign barbarians had decimated or destroyed not only Nalanda and Takshashila, but 23 major universities, centers of higher learning during that time, which were the center of the whole civilized world. Many students and scholars from all over the world used to come and participate as students or as teachers, visiting professors, for example, China, Persia, from the Arab countries to these universities. And it was very difficult for them to get admission. It was very difficult for them to get a job or a kind of an occupation. The standards were so high. So around 23 universities destroyed and decimated, but some still survived in the southern regions because the Mughals were not really able to completely overpower the southerners for a very, very long time. Sometimes the southern kingdoms were much larger than the Mughal kingdoms, and yet we know all these years as the Mughal period, which is again another story or the narrative that has been thrust upon us, as if India was under British. Before that, India was under Mughals. It's very, very straight-lined and straight-jacketed. We completely have ignored the huge areas of the south and the way they continuously resisted these Mughals, and that's why all these old temples and these old artifacts still retain their lost glory. As I was saying, when the Europeans were first here, according to their own census, according to their own reports, which have now been dealt with, which are now being considered, in the village level, at a rural level, even at a city level, there were quite popular still these ideas of a Gurukul or Brahmacharya ashram or toll or madrasas at that time, almost some of them residential. The ideas were still there. The classic idea being that Shiksha is life. It is not something, it's not a segment. It's not an enclosed space. It's not something that happens in specialization. It's not like you are in the nets, like in a cricket practice, there are nets around and you're within that net. No, it's a inclusive experience of life. So a child remains with his parents till he's 12. That is also Shiksha. He takes in all the experiences just like a child, and there is some kind of a home education through storytelling, through learning maybe it's the basics, and he gets to play and he gets to climb trees and he mixes with his family and friends and the neighbors in his locality, and at 12 he leaves his parents. Part of the education. It's very important that he leaves and stays in somewhere else for 12 years. That was a very essential part of the education, that he leaves, because he leaves attachments. He leaves this personal, you can say Maya of his parents, because this all embracing, all claustrophobic attention may be disruptive for him. So he goes away from this atmosphere and he stays in a Gurukul or a Brahmacharya. He or she, maybe there should be or there could have been also Gurukuls for girls or homes atmosphere, studies for girls. We know from the Ramayana and Mahabharata that the ladies were as educated in different arts and sciences and even warfare as the men. So anyway, they go, whoever he may be. He may be the son of a king. He may be the son of a carpenter. He may be the child of a tailor. He may be the child of a farmer. Whoever he or she may be, he goes. And they live and share the same space without the king's son getting any special benefits. And without any fees being given officially to these institutions. And anyway, let's not go into big details. This can be another topic. The main idea is that this is an atmosphere. It is just not a classroom and memorizing and giving exams and finding a job. It is developing, inculcating, evolving, and through a discipline. They wake up with the sun. They start chanting the Gayatri mantra. They do some yoga, some meditation. And then they start their studies. They prepare their own breakfast. They keep the ashram clean. They do their own cooking. They farm the fields. They serve the gurus, the acharyas, who are all very gentle, compassionate, and very careful, very wise, profound personalities who do not expect an increased salary from the government, who is not sitting for a kind of a dharna outside the administrative building for benefits. He's not applying for leaves. And all these under an open sky with cottages, a spread out atmosphere where one is constantly in contact with nature, with the seasons, with the flowers, with the trees, with the soil. So the learning process is not formal, it is organic. And he takes part in different activities, music, maybe arts, maybe theater, maybe dance. And he goes around accepting donations for the ashram, for these institutions. And people donate of their own will because they have a responsibility, because their own children are there. They have been brought up there also. They have spent 12 years in that institution. So it's a relationship. And then after completing these 12 years, this person or this child is now a young man. He was 12, just on the eve of his adolescent period. He learned yoga and sadhana and about his energy, the sexual energy. He learns to transform. So he should be a changed personality. He's a complete personality now, all-round personality. Maybe he's a good man, maybe he's a bad man. That is a different thing. Why do I say this? Like Duryodhan was a great yogi. At the end of the war, when he is tired, he goes inside a lake. And in a yoga posture, he's taking rest. So look, as a swabhab, as nature, he's evil. But he's powerful. He's a yogi because he had these backgrounds. So even the quality of life, even the quality of crime, even the quality of a criminal is of a higher state. I'm not saying that this is going to create a society which is perfect. No, which is overall going to be better, more evolved. You know, among the sadhus, there is a very famous saying, "Ye jagat jhoot hai, kutta ka pooch hai," which means no use trying to do good to the world. It is like the tail of a dog, which is always bent like this. You can never straighten the tail of a dog. Now, Guruji had said to his guru, in response to this, what is the use of doing social work? Ye jagat jhoot hai. That is what his guru had said. And so Guruji said that I do not want to make the tail straight. It is stooping down, facing the ground. I want to lift it towards the sky while it is still bent. There will still be good and bad. There will still be virtues and vices. There will still be dharma and adharma and all these things, but it will be more evolved in a higher, in a transformative plane. So that is what I'm saying. That we evolve. So when the person completes his 12 years in the Gurukul or the Brahmacharya system, I'm talking about the classic Bharatiya model, and he comes back, whatever he does now is going to be much a profound, a kind of an all-rounder. He's not scared. He can survive anywhere. He had, in these 12 years, he had learned his own svabhab. He knows what he's good at, whether it is science or engineering or crafts or farming or arts or culture or as in the line of medicine or sports, whatever. He knows himself now with the help of his gurus, his acharyas. And he's going to get married. And he knows what is the role of a husband, what is the dharma of a husband, or the dharma of a wife. And then he's going to become a father or a mother, and he knows, or she knows, the role and the dharma and the responsibilities of a parent. In this way he goes on. In this way the society builds up. In this way the nation builds up. Everybody doesn't have to say that, okay, we are all devotees, we are all bhaktas. No, but spirituality or dharma is the essence on which everything is going to build up. If the brahmacharya ashram or the gurukul ashram is the basis, is the foundation, then we will have politicians who will be essentially dharmic, who should be essentially dharmic. We will have engineers and doctors and farmers and businessmen and whoever, any aspect of life, even brahmacharis and monks, in every aspect of life, he will strive towards a higher evolution. He will be more aware of his responsibilities for the society, because that is what he has been doing for 12 years. They have been all taking collective responsibility for each other. All these people from different backgrounds together in one place. He would learn to acknowledge and respect diversity, which is the essence of the Bharatiya value, the Bharatiya dharma. Unless this idea of education comes back, I'm not saying that we have to copy and paste from the Vedic traditions, but this has to be the foundation, this has to be the model or the blueprint on which we build up our present day education values, away from the influence of the European or the colonizing bhav or the colonizing ideas. If we have to decolonize ourselves, there is no use just screaming Bharat Mata, no use screaming Sri Ram or Sri Krishna or Jai Hanuman without understanding these core values that we stand for. No use talking about the glorious Vedic times or the ancient past or the heritage without starting to implement them. And the main area of implementation is education, because from that will come everything else. Our economy, industry, our science, our technology, our philosophy, our politics, our relationships with other countries, whatever this concept of Vishwaguru that now everybody is talking about, or even as we have seen Swami Vivekananda was talking about, we have to implement this. We have to constantly be aware of it. And there's no use asking, so what's the use of talking about this? Who will implement? The mere fact that this demand, the mere fact that we are talking about it, and not only we, there are others who are beginning to wonder about these things, is going to create these vibrations. This is going to create the demand. And this demand will slowly shift our consciousness, which is already happening. It is already happening. I think at least most of the people in the world are discarding this kind of formal education models that we have got used to. It has come to a point of saturation. It is becoming obsolete. Many countries are trying out different experiments. They are smaller countries, so it is easier for them, and they are more independent. We are less. Let's now come to brass tacks. As I said, first problem is that we are still colonized mentally and intellectually. So we are still comparing, we are still waiting for some Indian to get a Nobel Prize. So some European countries will give us a Nobel Prize, and then we will think, oh, we are great. Somebody will recognize Ravi Shankar as a great master, and then we will say, oh, he's such a great musician. Someday Satyajit Ray will get some awards in festivals, and then we'll say, oh, what a great director he was. Or Rabindranath Tagore will become a Vishwakobi or a universal Guru Kobi only when he gets recognition from the West. So we are very, very colonized still. We are still waiting for others to constantly praise us. We don't even know whether we deserve it or not. And who are going to praise us? Who are just almost a barbaric civilization of 14 or 1500 years. who had destroyed their pre-Christian civilizations, which was much richer because they had connections with Bharat. And they are going to praise us, and we are waiting for their praises, which we are at least 10, 15. Researchers are still wondering because more and more evidence are coming out. 15,000 years old civilization. We are waiting to be applauded by them. So we are so deeply colonized. Our idea of development, our idea of welfare, our idea of progress are all along those lines, those figures which let's say the United Nations and all these UNESCOs, they dish out for us every day. You see? So, and that is one colonial hangover that we have. Besides, we yet don't know certain things about our independence that happened. 1947, transfer of power. There were a lot of treaties between the two sides. India became a Commonwealth country. What are those treaties? What was signed? All these files are still classified. So we are still we have a dominion status. So we really don't know how much free we are to implement all these new, original, often radical ideas in our life. You see? So we have to brace ourselves for that. And today's conflict all over the world, India is a center of attraction for all the powers. Please try to understand, because when India or Bharat emerges, in the sense when Bharat becomes aware of our own history as a nation, when we become aware of our own history, then the people who had created this theory, the Aryan theory, the civilization theory, the civilization story, their grounds will be completely destroyed. Realize that. I'm not saying that they will be destroyed. The ground on which they stand, their civilizational snobbery, their civilizational ego will be completely destroyed. It is not that we will gain back, reclaim our history. They will lose theirs because they will lose the lies that they have created. You see the problem? And that's why the whole world's attention is on India. In this attention, the extreme left, the extreme right, all the jihadi elements are together. And there are also corridors within India, within the country, we all know, that are conspiring to break Bharat apart so that Bharat will not be able to recover its own memory. If we break apart, then if I am a sole person, shouting about our history, or there are some groups or some people, lonely scholars, lonely visionaries who are trying to scream out the truth, nobody is going to listen because we are divided. Even our friends are going to backstab us because we are going to find different identities. Oh, you are a Hindu and I'm a non-Hindu. You are an Aryan, I'm a this. I'm a Bhil, I've been oppressed, and you are the upper caste and the lower caste. All these divisions are going to destroy our national identity. And this is what many powerful forces want. And that is why Swamiji had lamented that we are constantly taught in our schools to feel very disgraceful about ourselves, that we are weak and very poor, and we are, even today, what is Hinduism? Hinduism is caste system. What is Hinduism? Hinduism is widow burning. That is the standard story that goes on. That the Hindus, still when they have girl child, they drop off the child into the water, or they burn her, and all these things. This is the only thing that goes on about so-called Hinduism. Why? To destroy. The intellectual space is working overtime with a lot of funds being resourced into these studies to constantly create these subaltern narratives. So that is why in the contemporary context, this idea is very important of Swami Vivekananda and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, how relevant it was and why, as Bhagavanji, after 1945, this incognito, this monk from behind the curtain, started working on a different line. It was a change of strategy. As we have seen from that letter, Netaji understood very deeply the importance of religion in Indian life, the importance of religion to make India strong in the global platform. But at the same time, as a politician, as a national leader struggling for freedom, he did not want a separate Hindu Rashtra identity, because that was going to divide the country, and he knew that is exactly what the Europeans would want. That is exactly how they will be able to keep us under control, and they will be able to keep us constantly disturbed, constantly fighting with ourselves, between ourselves, so that we will not be able to concentrate on our, not only the economic development and the political strength, we will not be able to concentrate on building up the narrative, the grand narrative that we actually are. He was aware of that. And that's why he built up this Fauj, this Indian National Army, with Hindus of different castes, with Muslims, with Christians, with men and women. The first man in history to build up a women's battalion in the modern age. You know, people have to preach us about feminism. I will ask readers, I'll ask viewers to sort of read what Swami Vivekananda had told Sister Nivedita when he asked Nivedita to go and work among the women in India. Not to look at Indian women from the eyes of an European, but to understand the glorious values, in spite of the backwardness, the illiteracy and everything, the values of Indian womanhood and motherhood. She has to live with them, understand that, respect that, and from that Shraddha, start working on them to build up an identity. Because if the women are not aware of the crisis in society, then the society will fall back. It is not that they have to change themselves and become and adopt European values, adopt the values of freedom that he had seen among American women. Yes, he had admired that kind of freedom in American women. But he has also noticed that when he addressed somebody as mother, maybe thank you, Mary Mother, he would say, just like an Indian monk would do, they would get offended. Young girls, middle-aged ladies would get offended. Why have you called me mother? Have I become too old? Am I not young anymore? Am I not attractive anymore? And Swamiji used to say, look, the culture from where I came from, even if you address a little girl as mother, she feels proud. She feels good. Because motherhood has got nothing to do with age. Motherhood does not necessarily mean bearing children and becoming old. Motherhood is a very glorious virtue of love. And it is a respect. It is showing respect to a girl when you address her as a mother. So you have understood the deep difference between cultures. The apparent freedom, the economic freedom, the freedom to go alone without a man, and the freedom which a woman in India enjoys. She is the governor of the household. She takes decisions for everything, decisions about the husband or the child or the household or everything. Whether she knows to read or write is less important. The fact that she is inherently wise in many aspects of life, in the practical aspects of life, and everybody takes her decisions, accepts her decisions. This is a different kind of motherhood. So, which has to be nurtured, which has to be respected. At the same time, the other side of the world has to be brought in front of her. Like Saradama is a glorious example of motherhood, of an enlightened motherhood, let's say. So when we talk about feminism and all these things, we are being given lectures on feminism, the Bharatiya culture, which is still the only surviving culture in the globe, which still has mother worship as one of its core values. Yes, there are many fault lines. I agree. But we all know the faults. And we have been discussing these faults. We have been criticizing these faults. Swami Vivekananda has very sternly condemned these faults. We know all this. And we are, our society is constantly in a constant mold of self-correction. That's why we have reformers and sangaskaraks. Guru Nanak did not come to preach a new religion. He was a sangaskarak. Gautam Buddha did not come to preach a new religion or to invent a new religion. He was a sangaskarak of what was going on, of the universal dharma that was going on, and all the problems that were there, all the fault lines that were there. He came to repair them. He did not build up a new, he did not intend to build up a new religion. It became a new religion. Mahavir Jaina did not build up a new religion. Nothing of there is in their teachings which is different from the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Job and all the Shastras and the scriptures that are available. They were social reformers. They were social reformers. These are not separate religions, not separate, you can say, dharma math. It is an umbrella of the same universal dharma. Somebody you need sometime you need somebody to come and reinterpret them for us, because maybe we have been deviating. So all these sangaskaraks had come to again, bring back the main current that flows towards our purpose, the purpose of life, not my personal purpose, not your personal purpose. The idea of perfection that Swami Vivekananda talks about in his definition of education. The aim for perfection, the pursuit for perfection, the pursuit for truth is a purpose of life. It is not a personal, my or your or their. It's not a question of choice. There can be a question of choice whether you want to be a doctor or an engineer or a farmer or a craftsman or electrician. There you may have a choice about selecting your livelihood, but about the purpose of your life, it is universal. It is not that something you choose. Yes, there comes a time when you become aware of that purpose. Maybe when you meet a sadhu or you come to your guru, you become conscious about that purpose. It's not something that he plants in you. It's there as a potential. It is where you are consciously or unconsciously evolving towards. You see? So that, I think, is very important to understand in the context of education. All these narratives that have been thrown in on us, let's put it very, very, very flatly and in straight lines now, that Bharat is a very old culture, the mother culture. And there have been comparable some other great cultures which have all been destroyed, except, let's say, to some extent, the Chinese culture. They are very nationalistic, in spite of the fact that they are, ideologically communist, but they are very, very nationalistic. If you go to China, there is no such thing as all American scientists and American media and European literature and all these things. Everything there has come from China, according to there. So even Japan, very nationalistic. There is nothing wrong in nationalism. And let me, say something also very sensitive. Today, fascism has become a very bad word. Today, fascism has become a very bad word. It's a kind of a slur. If somebody calls me fascist, I'm supposed to be very angry. I should be very angry. I would say that you are bad-mouthing me. But during Netaji's time in the late 30s, before Hitler had started his pogrom, let's say, against the Jews, fascism was a respectable word, just like socialism and communism and capitalism. Fascism was also discussed. in intellectual circles, among statesmen and politicians, writers, because as Netaji himself explains, fascism is a mix of nationalism and socialism. Socialism means where the wealth is evenly distributed, where everybody gets an equal opportunity to grow and prosper irrespective of caste, creed, religion, whatever. When that socialism, idea of socialism becomes extreme, when even the modes of production is controlled by the community, then it becomes communism. So socialism is a very fair thing, and Vivekananda was quite, respectful about Karl Marx's literature, but he felt that Karl Marx's idea of communism or socialism was too material and concerned with only creature comforts. Bharat knows Bharat has an inherent socialism which is concerned with the intellectual, moral, and spiritual development of all. It's not only property and money and economy and jobs and what I gain from the resources, the physical resources. It's much more than that. So for that, I think he became very unpopular. Today, he's very, very, you can say, a controversial figure because of his ideas on fascism. But at that time, the word was a very respectful word. Today, it has become a slur because with Hitler, he has earned a stamp. His Nazism and his fascism and whatever. We'll not go into that, all these details. So, Netaji, idea of Bharat, he concentrated a lot on discipline. That is why he did say, I think in 1943 in Singapore, he did say that after independence, after India becomes free, she needs a dictator for 20 years. Because he was a man who loved to be very, very organized, detailed, and disciplined. And he believed that India needs discipline. It's a very chaotic country. And discipline to build up the nation. That was his idea. And for 20 years, he said, I think we do not have to agree with this again. Because what has happened has happened. We did not have these 20 years of dictatorship. We did not have this one-man rule. We did have 17 years of Jawaharlal Nehru, but it was not dictatorship. It was a so-called democracy based on the European model or whatever. However, all these years have passed, and now we are going to re-evaluate our political options. But what would have been? I mean, it could be a nice speculation because India, Bharat, whether a small states or big state, or centralized or decentralized, whatever, Bharat was always used to some kind of a dynastic monarchy for thousands of years. And suddenly a European kind of democracy was thrust on us. So the dynasty also remained because it is within our sentiment. Whoever is the ruler he's chosen by God, and so his daughter is also from God. So the son is also from God. All this because the sanskars, these impressions are still deeply there. And it is not only with India. England has a royal family. Norway has a royal family. Japan has. They are now decorative, more decorative than before. Okay. They're not so functional as governing bodies. So it's not something that India is very middle-aged, that the Rajtantra and all that. But I think it is a point to ponder about that Bharat was essentially used to kingship, let's say, instead of saying monarchy, kingship. And what happens if we have a benevolent king, a good king? This is also something, this can be an interesting discussion. For example, a king like Ram, or a king like Yudhishthir, king like, let's say, Chandragupta. What's wrong? I mean, the one problem is that they don't have to worry that after 5 years, I may lose my power, that I have to fight again and struggle and seek votes and give this section this benefit, that section that benefit, a tube well to the villagers, some quota to this community, and somehow 1 rupee kg rice, bicycles for all, and somehow win back and come back to my throne. He doesn't have to worry about these things. So when he's thinking about the development of his state, if he's a good person, if he's a benevolent, and if he's advised by spiritual personalities who have no self-interest, then he can take long-term decisions for the good of all. He can judge cases by merit. Because it's not that he's a dictator. He always has to face a mirror of his council of ministers, of his gurus, of the priests, or sections of people. Ram was always advised by Dasharath, whatever your ministers say, sometimes you just go off from the palace in disguise and go to different villages, to far off towns and villages, and sit with people. Try to understand them. This is something Dasharath used to do, and he advised his son when he talked about the role of a king. You see, Yudhishthir, when Bhishma is lying on his bed of thorns, Yudhishthir goes to him and learns the science and the art of politics. It's not that he pretends that he knows all. He's always a student, constantly learning. So what is the problem? I mean, you can ask these questions. What is the problem if there is somebody like him on the throne, and sages and gurus who have nothing, who have no property of their own, no particular community of monks to safeguard? What if somebody like him is advising him? So if Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose had thought along those lines, is it very autocratic? Is it another kind of, fascism that the intellectuals talk about? Because he said 20 years. After that, he knew that the country would be ready for now what we know as democracy. Because maybe there's a huge percentage of people who go to vote and they don't know for whom they're voting, why they're voting, what are the responsibilities that they're carrying. They just have some little self-interest in mind, and the leader has promised them something. Why has the leader promised them something? Because the leader has to gain power or to retain power. So the power is more important than the country. The party is more important than the country. That is the problem, at least in this country, in Bharat, the problem of democracy that we see, that we still see. Even in this wave, these passions of nationalism, even nationalism is being used as a vote bank. The idea of nationalism is being sold and bought as a vote bank. When they will see that secularism is not popular anymore, nationalism will have different hues and colors. One party will say that we have a Ram nationalism. Another party will say we have a general nationalism. Another party will say we have a constitutional nationalism. The constitution is the Shastra. That is the national Gita. So we will have different conflicting nationalisms when secularism will become completely out of fashion. Because this will again be the party agenda. It has got nothing to do with the long-term development, the long-term definition, the long-term growth, the spiritual, moral, philosophical, economical, political, everything. When we talk about dharma at the center, everything will fall in place, as Vivekananda had predicted. That if you allow religion to be strong, then the waters will start to flow on both the sides, you see. So that is why, if Netaji had felt, and maybe he had understood the situation, that the British leaves India, and that India is undivided, because if Netaji had been successful, and Japan had not surrendered, and all these things had fallen in place, then it would have taken just days for the INA to claim power. because most of the British Indian army were jumping fences and joining Netaji at that time. So he would have become the head of the country, whatever name, president or prime minister, whatever. And that would have been an undivided Bharat, very important. Because, like Vastu, this mother figure is very important. It is to Netaji, even to Bhagavanji. It is his spiritual Ishta, this mother. He is constantly, sort of singing or praying or talking or worshipping this Janani Janmabhumi, my motherland, my mother. He equates this mother with Kali, Durga, all the female deities in the Hindu scriptures. His life had started revolutionizing. His life completely revolutionized when, as he said, Vivekananda entered him when he was 15. And then when he was 19, he's writing that I can feel a mission within me. Again, another mission. That I have to really gather experiences and travel and become an embodiment of the past. He's writing to his friend at the age of 19. Very important. What do we do at the age of 19? We are just taking selfies and, having fun time on chatting with friends. Now, I'd have to become the embodiment of the past. Look, his understanding of Bharat. Today also we have to do this. And then I have to become the product of the present. And then I have to travel all the world over and become the prophet of the future. 19-year-old kid is taking the responsibility of a god almost on him. Like he's talking like an avatar. He's talking like, the personality of this age. And it is not an empty boasting. So if you just concentrate, it's like the voice of Vivekananda in another form. It's echoing. And this is something that we also have to do. As I was telling you, the idea of the Bharatiya model of Shiksha, part of that, one of the final aspects of that model was that at the time of their, almost towards the end of these 12 years, the students, when they came to their guru and did pranam, the guru would tell them, okay, now for 1 year or for 6 months or 8 months, you take a tour of the country, of these lands, visit the 51 temples, visit the 12 Jyotirlingams, alone, with a stick in your hand. That's all. No resources, no friends, no connections. I will not tell you, go to this ashram and this person, this monk I know, you can go there and take rest. No. No references, no recommendations. And that's 8 months, 1 year, he goes around these temples. Means what? He moves across the length and breadth of the country. And he knows, by the end of the year, he knows his country now. He understands it, the great diversity, the cultural diversity, the language, the food, the beliefs, the joys and the sorrows and the laughters and the pains and villages and forests and mountains and caves, and he knows the whole spectrum. Isn't that education? What education do we really have in a classroom, mugging up notes? Isn't this education? Isn't a man completely transformed when one has this experience alone? He's not a tourist. He's not even a pilgrim. He's a paribrajak. Again, another word which doesn't have an English equivalent. Wanderer, you can say, but wanderer means somebody who's moving around aimlessly. He has an aim. It's a sadhana. All these years in the ashram, he has been doing a sadhana, and now the sadhana he's doing it outside, with the outside world. He's allowing the world to come and enter him, so that he knows his land, he knows his culture, so that he gets to meet a mother at a different level. You see? So we did not have this experience, you see. So Today, all these discussions are important because we cannot compromise anymore with the idea of Bharat, with the idea of Bharatiya Dharma, Bharatiya Siksha. I'm intentionally using these words because the more we use English equivalents, the more they demonize the Sanskrit language. They have the audacity to say that Sanskrit is a fascist language. These are very great intellectual scholars in Europe and America, in Princeton and Oxford and Harvard, who are Pandits and learned scholars in Indology in India, they have the audacity to say that Bhagavad Gita is a text that promotes violence. You know why? Why they can say this? Because they try to translate these words, Sanskrit words, into English or French or Italian or German or whatever, and they do not understand the language at all. They really don't understand. It's not that they do it purposely. They really don't understand the deep philosophy, the multi-layered meanings of words. For example, Uttar. When you say Uttar, Uttar means answer. Uttar means also north. So answer, when there's a question or when there's an inquiry, an answer is a response which helps you to travel a little up. So Uttarakhand. So people, seekers and sadhus who used to search for answers in Bharat, they used to travel Uttar to find answers. So you see, the word has such nuanced meaning. From that Uttar Kal, what happens later? What is a consequence? Same thing with Purva, before. And it's from before that the sun rises. There it rises first. So before. So all these words have been designed, had been created with deep, you can say, meditation, contemplation, sadhana. It is impossible for them, for cultures which are basically developed from physical understanding of the world. They have physically tried to understand the world first. That's why they are always breaking things down, atoms and everything, to understand the mysteries of creation, and trying to understand without taking into consideration the observer. But in Bharat, it is different. It is you understand yourself. The deeper you go into yourself, the more you go, the deeper you understand the things and the realities around you as an extension of yourself. So that is the root from which, from that understanding that, you see, Indian or Bharatiya languages have evolved. So it is impossible for them to translate. Atma is not soul. Impossible. Their soul comes out, goes out, comes in, and all these things happen. Atma is all permeating reality. So when they try to translate, and we also use their translations a lot, and so they can, manipulate now by misinterpreting words and expressions and trying to prove convincingly to their audience or to their readers that all these Indian customs, Indian rituals, Indian texts, Indian languages, Indian scriptures, Indian religions are full of violence and fascism and need to be avoided, and all these things are being done. Part of the campaign that is going on to tear apart the fabric of this civilization, which is now finally trying to find a voice for itself. And that, I think, that is why Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose had insisted on these 20 years of dictator. And when we hear the word dictator, we are thinking of some monstrous figure, you see. He had also qualified by benevolent dictatorship. So what to say? King is not anymore a realistic word, because a king means a family, that his son or the daughter has to continue the legacy. Here it's a person who has a vision, and he's surrounded by people who have vision, and maybe is guided and advised by sages and tyagis. So it is very important that he had said this, because he understood the reality of Bharat, and maybe after 20 years Bharat would have been more ready, more conscious, more aware, more in tune with its own national history, with its own narrative, grand narrative, with its own dharma, with its own traditions, to be able to slowly resort to a democratic process. That is very important. And the last little point that I would like to mention as I was preparing myself for this session, Swami Vivekananda puts a lot of emphasis on tyag. Again, sacrifice is not the word for tyag. Even renunciation is not the proper word for tyag. Tyag is tyag. And he's always saying his fervent appeal, dear Bharat, do not forget that your ideal is all renouncing Sarvotyagi Shankar, Shiva. That does not mean that Shiva is a beggar. He's a figure with all the great qualities. That does not mean that Shiva is craving for palace life. He can create and live in a palace any moment he wants. But Shiva is a symbol of Satyam Shivam Sundaram. As Netaji himself says, to him, he says, nationalism, the core of nationalism is Satyam Shivam Sundaram. It is a direct quote from Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So look at the similarities. Tyag means what? I mean, renouncing what? Parting with what? Parting with selfishness, parting with narrow interests, parting with petty desires, parting with narrow outlooks, parting with little ambitions, and to develop a more wholesome, a greater vision. How could Swamiji have this great vision of Bharat and the world and Asia? How could Netaji become? While he was struggling for Indian freedom and he went to Europe and then came to Asia, he then became the liberator of Asia, and he was quite aware of that. He was always talking about the emancipation of Asia. How could they develop such vision? Because they had managed to leave aside their personal petty gains, personal petty motives, profits, interests, desires. The moment you leave them aside, there is no magic. It's natural that the whole will grow into you, that the big wide spectrum will become part of you. Your sense of I will be all embracing, all inclusive. That is a natural consequence. So Swamiji had insisted on this word tyag. This is something that we will have to be aware of. That does not mean that you don't marry. Please try to understand. That does not mean that you do not earn a livelihood. That means you do not keep yourself confined within these boundaries. You think of yourself as greater, much broader than that, and we all are actually that, much greater than what our so-called education has taught us to be. That be just satisfied by being a graduate, be just satisfied being a clerk or being an officer or getting a chance in a big corporate house. Be satisfied that now that you have a child, all your ambitions fulfilled. Now take rest, watch TV and earn money. Do not confine yourself to this. Only then Bharat will start to speak within us. That is, and in the same lines, look what Netaji is saying. That if for freedom you have to pay with blood. Again, he's talking about tyag. not necessarily, blood does not have to be taken literally. Blood at least can be taken in this sense of tag, that you spill something, you pay a price. Swamiji had said that mother, that is in this case Mother Bharat, wants some sacrifice. Boli, he says. He needs, is the food. And it's in the same vein, because Netaji was not merely a political figure, he was a seeker, he was a sadhak. He knew the spiritual principles. He knew that as a country, as a mass, as a population, we had not faced this crisis together. It is very important to understand that. I often remind all the Netaji lovers and passionate people that he had said that I'll give you blood and you give me blood and I'll give you freedom. Very good, very well. We all know this sentence. We are all pronouncing this statement. It's very appealing. It's very catchy. But the Bharatiyas did not spill any blood. Yes, the Aryan people did. Bharatiyas from outside, who were prisoners of war in these Asian countries, they did. But did the whole of India wake up and rise up? Did they? Netaji was constantly expecting that to happen. That did we all pay a price together as a nation? As Japan paid a price at the end of the Second World War, and look what happened. Within a couple of decades, 3 decades, Japan became one of the strongest nations in the world because they had faced the crisis together, they had suffered together. Same thing happened to Germany. Did we suffer together? We suffered at our own hands by dividing ourselves. How much we were celebrating when the flag was being lifted in 1947, the flag of independence. The country was bleeding, not from wars, but from this division. That Hindus and Muslims, populations were being shifted. And there was great despair and riots and killings on both sides. This is not a price of freedom. This is a price of compromise. So Netaji Subhash Bose always insisted on this, that freedom asks for blood. A kind of a collective, not a personal. It's not one alone, none, some Netaji or some freedom fighter doing something and we are here enjoying ourselves, enjoying our food, getting jobs, marrying and having children and expecting somebody else to come and give us our freedom, give us our emancipation, give us our enlightenment, give us our redefinition of ourselves. He always insisted that, this is very practical and this is very, very, very contemporary. Right at this moment, as we speak, it is very important that we become aware and we take responsibility and not expect somebody else, not blame governments, not blame parties. Enough of blaming. We don't have to also blame ourselves. No need. Let's look into ourselves and let's see how much we can do, first within and then without. As we grow, we should become a mini Bharat within ourselves. And then this feeling, this collective feeling spreads and embraces. And that is how the national identity can become really solid. Otherwise, it's very brittle. Because you have your own idea, definition of nationalism. I have my own idea. Somebody else has something else. Somebody along religious lines, somebody along political lines, somebody along cultural lines. So we will constantly be squabbling and fighting about interpretations. The best thing is the dharma, the spiritual process, the gurukul. Consider yourself to be in a gurukul. Go inside, see, dig out your own resources and listen to your motherland speaking to you from there, because we carry in our blood the great wisdom of the rishis, the gurus, the inspiration of a Buddha, the love of a Chaitanya, the vision of a Vivekananda, We carry it, I'm not joking. We have it in ourselves. Just our colonized mind has become a curtain in front of it. That's all. Lift the curtain, go deep inside, and discover the Bharat within you. And that is, I think, the first step in which this awakening will happen. And fortunately, it is already happening. Well, I think I've been talking for a long time 2 hours, 50 minutes. So now I give the floor back to you, Pratyay, and I mute myself. So, where are the hosts? Have you become offline, Pratyay? I think yes, we can correct it. We can correct it. Something is wrong. Very sorry. Few wrong emoji was sending my little daughter over, and I don't know. We need to get rid of the constant craving for Western endorsement. I don't see anything in comment, but where are the hosts? Has the session expired or something? But I don't think. I think StreamYard allows is going on. So anyway, since I cannot interact with the hosts, Pratyay and a few others, it seems that they have gone to the kitchen for some refreshments. They are bored with almost 3 hours of
Hello,
non-stop talking.
am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, now you are. Now you are. Yes.
Yeah, actually,
Yes.
I have been in the session, but due to a technical lag, I was not audible. I am thankful for your time, and it was a very enlightening session, and I was totally through with the discussion. But the fact was that since the time there was a technical lag over our thing, we have already been clicking on it, and it was not being clicked. So that was technical issue. Okay, so we would want more of such sessions, such enlightening sessions and precious words from you, and we would request you to guide us through the different segments of the questions which have been keeping on coming, and we can pose those questions later on in the next sessions. So thanks a lot from your uh, for your time, and let's say goodbye to our audience for this day. Okay.
Yes. Also, thank you, Pratyay, and I would request the audience to bear with us. That this has been, I think, a long talk and but important. Some significant points have been
I would,
raised. So
yeah, I
I
would say,
definitely am sure there are some very good questions also. So we will deal with these questions as far as possible in our next session. For the time being, let's absorb all the things that has been shared, and let's wait at the incubation period now, and then again next day we will go into more detail, and we'll tackle some of the questions that have come up.
thanks a lot once again. Okay,
Okay.
bye.
Okay.